voters. That's not to say McAuliffe doesn't have his own problems. Polling suggests that voters find him maybe a little too glib and a little too superficial. It's not entirely clear what kind of turnout he can expect from traditionally Democratic African-American voters. But all in Virginia, Republicans are the ones who are bracing for the worst. Because since the Republican outlook in both the governor's race and the lieutenant governor's race isn't promising, many insiders in Virginia are holding their breath and watching the attorney general's race very closely because at the moment that seems to be the party's best chance of avoiding a Democratic sweep of all the state's top offices.
Now, I mentioned the runoff in Alabama for a special election to fill a vacancy. It's a congressional race that exhibits national attention.
Right, and typically this is the kind of race that flies under the radar because it's a heavily Republican seat that's all but certain to replace its Republican congressman with a new Republican congressman. So the likely outcome isn't going to change the balance of power in Congress. But the twist is, in this case, the kind of Republican who wins the runoff today makes a very big difference. On the one side, you've got an establishment-backed conservative named Bradley Byrne. He's the beneficiary of a late infusion of cash and support from House Republican leaders, and also, more important, from the Chamber of Commerce. On the other side, Bradley Byrne's opponent, Dean Young, hails from the Tea Party wing of the Republican Party. His campaign is powered by conservative grassroots energy since he's being badly outspent, and he needs that not vote for House Speaker John Boehner.
And briefly, let's just talk quickly about the mayoral elections in Boston and New York City.
Well, there's a big roster of mayoral elections across the map in places as varied as Seattle and Minneapolis, Detroit, Boston, and New York. And I think Boston and New York are probably the most interesting, or at least noteworthy today, because it's the end of a political era in both of those cities as they prepare to replace longtime mayors Tom Menino and Michael Bloomberg.
Okay, and NPR digital political editor Charlie Matessian. Charlie, thanks so much.
Thank you, Melissa.
And one of the major elections today is, as we heard, right here in Boston. Voters are choosing new city councilors. East Boston residents are deciding whether to permit a casino at Suffolk Downs. And of course, voters citywide are choosing risk today. Fred Tice and Asma Khalid are among the WBUR reporters who've been out at polling places and with the candidates today. Asma joins us now in the studio. Hi, Asma.
Hi.
And Fred joins us by phone from West Roxbury. Hi, Fred.
Hi, how are you, Sasha?
Good. And Asma and Fred, could you both start us off by telling us about the mood of the voters you've talked with? I mean, even objectively, I think it's fair to say this is a momentous election in terms of a mayor in Boston, but do voters seem to consider this an important moment for the city? And Asma, why don't you start us off?
Sure. I think, voters across the board do feel that this is a very important election, and I think that was probably most sort of clearly defined by one voter I talked to in Dorchester this morning. He's 29 years old, and he said flatly, the last election when that wasn't the case for me.
So he does sense that he's making a significant vote today in terms of who the new leader will be.
Exactly, and in particular for his life. He's a young voter, and we usually don't see so many young voters in these municipal elections, but he felt it was important for him to be there.
And Fred, what are you hearing on that front?
Well, certainly I think both of you feel the same way. I was talking to some voters here at Holy Name, which is probably the biggest precinct place in Boston. There are four polling places in Boston. There are four precincts here from Roslindale and West Roxbury. And this is obviously this is John Connolly territory here. And so you're finding a preponderance of John Connolly voters as expected.